Serious. Women who gave the creep a chance. How did it go? Story 1. We had a terrible date. I wanted to cancel beforehand but felt guilty doing it. He texted a lot after. I told him straight that I did not feel the same way about him and wait for it. He took it well. He thanked me for being straight up with him and for giving him a chance. I hope he found someone. Story 2. After a few dates, he started to get way too serious. I told him calmly and honestly that I wasn't ready for a serious relationship and he deserved to be with someone who was. He completely flipped, and after a bit of name calling, I stood up and started to leave the bar. He then said, "You should watch yourself in the future, especially when getting into your car." I was extremely paranoid for months after. Would check my back seat and under my vehicle. Never saw him again, so just an empty threat, but not a fun time. That was like 15 years ago. Yeah, he's still single. Story 3. I bought him a coffee one time and we chatted about our music tastes. 3 days later, I was sitting in my dorm and I got a text from him that was just a selfie. I sent one back and the conversation got really boring, so I sent him a snap of a black screen. He responded, "Are you in a dark place?" And I said, "Yeah, lol." His response was, "Well, you'll have to leave soon because you have class in insert building with insert professor at 6 o'clock. I literally never told him anything about my classes, so he just stalked me until he learned my entire schedule. It turns out he was a serial creep preying on freshman girls. Story 4. At the end of a weird and terrible date, he asked me for a hug as I was turning to leave. I thought, whatever gets this over with. As I was pulling away, he forcibly grabbed the back of my head and shoved his tongue in my mouth before I was able to break free. The next morning, I had a 3-page email in my inbox telling me all the things that are wrong with me and why he is not interested in a second date. Story 5. It ended badly. He became very stalkerish and was very insecure about other men. He even tried to isolate me from my friends. Story 6. On our first date, he told me he loved me and that he would let me pick out the color of our house. The rest of the evening was super awkward and I never talked to him ever again. Story 7. Met him when I worked as a cashier in a small downtown shop. Wasn't my type and seemed a little off, but I was young and had zero real dating experience. Agreed to grab coffee as a friend and made it clear I didn't have a romantic interest. He became very convinced he was Gatsby and I was his Daisy. The Great Gatsby film had just come out that year. He started stalking me and endlessly sending letters and gifts to me at work describing how we were fated to be together. When I confronted him to stop, he started having his friends follow me at work or drop by to check in on me. Prowled outside on nights I had to close shop alone. I ended up quitting that job and things fizzled. 7 months later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the same dude. He just got released from a short prison sentence and was letting me know he thought of me every day and was going to find me so we could finally be together. I made up a story that I was traveling abroad for college and would be gone indefinitely. Changed my number and luckily haven't heard from him again. Story 8. He stabbed my end table with a knife after getting upset with me, then started stalking me. I moved and invested in cameras for my house and a dash cam. 1 million emails, police reports, etc. Oh, and his twin brother SA'd and stalked girls a few years prior. Ended up offing 2 police officers. Seems like creep runs in the family. Story 9. He threatened to off himself when I tried to break up with him, and he eventually started stalking me when I did end things. Don't date a creep. Story 10. I'll give the rare success story. Not with me, but it's not as bad as the others. He was sort of creepy and weird and neckbeardy. We hung out and sort of flirted because I didn't want to be seen as shallow and didn't know how to hold boundaries, but I wasn't really interested. I eventually just sort of stopped giving him attention and giving off signals. Apparently he made a couple snide comments to people we both knew about how I don't date muggles. Monogamous people. Anyway, that was a dick thing to say. A few years later, I saw him at a con and he waved me down and I was nervous, but he was like, "Hey, I wanted to apologize. I was a real prick to you and your friends. I've done a lot of work on myself and realized that women not liking me isn't a them problem, it's a me problem." I forgave him and we hung out a couple times after that at cons, hence. Good guy. Just had been going through a cringy phase. Story 11. I walked in on him peeing in my washing machine after letting him in my home for some reason. Story 12. This guy was handsome, but way too into me for knowing nothing about me. It wasn't like when we spoke, I was an open book or felt a strong connection that would lead me to want to share info with him. This was not a, I feel like I've known this man forever connection. I just thought this was normal dating, but had a gut feeling something was off. He talked to me like I'd been his girlfriend for months. We went on 3 dates. Never even did it. After third date, I had made my decision based on our short time getting to know one another and let him know I had no interest in continuing to date and that I didn't see us being compatible long term. He then locked me in his car, proceeded to ask if I wanted to move to California with him. What the F? And started crying and begging me to work this out. I tried to be very nice, but it got to the point I was scared and wasn't sure how this was going to be since he was virtually a stranger. So I hit his dashboard and said if he didn't let me out of his car immediately, I was going to call the police. Then he threatened to off himself if I didn't spend the night with him at his house. I've never even been to this man's house. He finally let me out after like an hour or two, but stayed in the parking lot of my apartment almost the entire night and called me non-stop. About a month later, he texted me out of the blue a really long paragraph apologizing profusely and saying if I ever changed my mind to call him. I just said thanks for the apology and wished him well. Hope he's doing okay, but I wanted no part of that. Story 13. The dude in the flat across from mine started off as a really nice guy. Introduced himself, offered meals when he'd cook too much, just a great guy all around. Within a few weeks, it was made clear that he was an alcoholic. I have a recovering brother, so I really sympathized with him. I went out of my way to sit with him and eventually called him an ambulance when he fitted from withdrawals. UK, so an ambulance is free. This carried on for a little while, with me sitting with him 2 or 3 times a week, waiting for an ambulance. One night, after he started fitting, he kept grabbing my breasts. I was already on the phone to the ambulance service, but the woman heard me telling him to stop and sent police as well. He was taken away, and just like usual, I grabbed his keys and told him to knock for them the next morning. Well, the next time I looked after him, the groping got worse, and then slowly, so did my life. Suddenly, I had fires set outside my windows and mutilated rat corpses left on my doorstep. The police were called after every incident, and I got to know one policeman who was put on my case really well. He suggested I put up cameras, so I did. There was footage of the neighbor standing outside in the yard at 3 a.m, just staring into my window. Multiple nights in a row. Terrifying, but not illegal. Well, 2 weeks after that, my neighbor snapped. There were builders in the garden next to ours, and they apparently woke him up at 4 p.m. He ran out with a kitchen knife and stabbed 2 of the builders and the neighbor's dog. Everyone survived. He also slashed a whole bunch of tires on our street. When the police came to search the dude's flat, my policeman friend told me, off the books, that the neighbor had been faking being an alcoholic the entire time. He'd get an ambulance, ride it to the hospital, and then check himself out and walk home. Also, they found 6 decomposing rats in his bathtub. They'd been mutilated. They later found a bloody hammer under his bed. You'd think him being arrested would be the end of it, but no. He put my name, picture, address, and telephone number on a prostitution site. I had men aggressively hounding me for the deed multiple times an hour for 2 entire weeks before I just cut all ties and fled the city. Last I heard, he was in jail for GBH, but that was a few years now. Yeah, never gonna make the same mistake again.